The door stood open again, which meant Rhett Marlowe had given up on pretending he did not know she was coming. Vasha Narok paused at the edge of the clearing where his cottage crouched between the pines, her breath misting in the autumn night. 4 nights she had knocked with some excuse about losing her key, needing shelter until morning when her cousin could let her into the orchard cabin. 4 nights he had opened the door, stepped aside, offered blankets and the space near his fire without questions that would have forced her to lie more elaborately. Tonight the door simply stood ajar, golden lamplight spilling onto the frost-rimed grass, and she did not know whether to feel relief or shame. She was not supposed to feel anything. She was supposed to watch, assess, and report back to her uncle whether the human who had appeared 3 months ago and bought the old Penner homestead posed any danger to the Orchard clan that had worked this valley in secret for 2 generations. Orcs were tolerated on the frontier only when they stayed invisible, kept their heads down, took jobs humans did not want. A reclusive stranger buying land adjacent to their orchards, asking no questions, making no friends in the village 5 miles south. That was the kind of thing that could mean trouble. So Vasha had volunteered to find out what he was hiding, because she was the youngest, the quickest, and the one who could pass for merely foolish if she got caught instead of threatening. She had not expected him to be kind. She had not expected him to look at her with warm brown eyes and a crooked smile and say, the very first night, "Come in before you freeze," as if her green skin and tusks and the lie about a lost key were utterly unremarkable. Vasha crossed the clearing and stepped through the open door. Rhett stood by the fireplace, prodding a log into place. He glanced up when her shadow fell across the threshold. "Evening," he said. "Tea is hot if you want some. You left the door open." The words came out more accusatory than she intended, seemed easier than waiting for the knock. He straightened, brushing bark from his hands. He was tall but not towering, perhaps 6 feet, with the kind of lean build that suggested strength used daily rather than shown off. His hair was brown going gray at the temples, though he looked no older than 35, and he wore the plain wool and leather of a man who worked his own land. "You are welcome here, Vasha. I thought you should know that." The shame curled tighter in her chest. He was using her real name, the one she had given him because she was a terrible spy and had panicked when he asked. A good infiltrator would have lied about everything. A good infiltrator would not have spent the past 4 nights sitting by this fire talking about the valleys, weather patterns and the best apple varieties, and whether the pine martens were bolder this year. Conversations that had nothing to do with assessing threats, and everything to do with the fact that Rhett Marlowe listened when she spoke and laughed at her jokes, and made her feel like someone worth knowing. "I have tea at home," Vasha said, but she closed the door behind her and moved toward the fire anyway, because the night was cold and the cabin was warm and she was tired of pretending she did not want to be here. "Do you, though?" Rhett poured 2 cups from the kettle on the hearth. "You have been locked out 4 nights running. I am starting to think your cousin does not like you much. She is a heavy sleeper." "Must be." He handed her a cup. His fingers brushed hers, calloused and warm. "Or you have the worst luck with keys in the entire valley." Vasha wrapped both hands around the cup and said nothing. The tea was mint and chamomile, the same blend he had shared every night. He remembered what she liked. That should not matter, but it did. Rhett settled into the chair across from her, his own cup cradled in one hand. The fire crackled between them. Outside, an owl called, low and mournful. "You do not have to keep losing keys to visit," he said quietly. "The door is open. That is what I am trying to tell you." Her throat tightened. "Why?" "Because I like your company, because you make me laugh. Because this valley is quiet and beautiful and lonely, and having someone to talk to at the end of the day is the best part of it." He met her eyes over the rim of his cup. Is that enough of a reason? It was too many reasons, all of them dangerous. Vasha looked down at her tea. You do not know me. I know you work the orchards. I know you are clever and funny and you care about your family enough to walk through the cold every night rather than risk waking them. I know you like your tea sweet and you hum when you think no one is listening. He paused. What else do I need to know? Everything, Vasha thought. That I am lying to you. That my family sent me here to spy. That we are terrified of what you might do if you decide orcs do not belong in this valley. You are strange, she said instead, which was true but inadequate. People have mentioned that. Rhett smiled, crooked and unworried. I will take strange over normal any day. They drank their tea in silence. The fire burned low. Vasha should leave, should go back to the orchard cabin and tell her uncle that the human seemed harmless, maybe a little odd but not a threat. She should stop coming here. She should definitely stop enjoying it so much. There is stew left if you are hungry, Rhett said. I always make too much. You are going to spoil me. Good. The warmth in his voice did something complicated to her heart. Vasha set down her cup and stood suddenly restless. I should go. You just got here. I know, but she did not have a good reason. She had run out of excuses nights ago. It is late. Rhett stood as well, moving between her and the door, not blocking it, just standing close enough that she had to look up at him. Vasha, what are you afraid of? Nothing. The lie tasted bitter, all right. He stepped aside, giving her space. The door is always open. Come back whenever you want. I will be here. That was the problem. He would be here, steady and kind and utterly unaware of the tangle he was walking into. Vasha brushed past him, out into the cold night, and did not look back even though she wanted to. The orchard sprawled across the valley's southern slope. 200 acres of apples and pears and plums that had made the Narok clan quietly prosperous over 2 generations of careful work. Vasha's uncle, Rhett Narok, ran the operation with an iron fist and a deep distrust of any human who paid them too much attention. He was waiting when Vasha slipped into the cabin she shared with her cousin Hela, his broad frame filling the doorway. Well. Greff's voice was low, pitched not to wake Hela in the loft. He is harmless. Vasha hung her coat by the door. He keeps to himself, works his land, does not bother anyone. 4 nights you have gone there. It should have taken one to figure out if he is a threat. I am being thorough. Greff's yellow eyes narrowed. You are being careless. What if he suspects? He does not. Are you certain? Because if this man decides to make trouble, if he goes to the village and tells them there are orcs living up here, running an operation this size, we lose everything. You understand that? Vasha understood. She had been 8 years old when the last frontier town had turned on its orc workers, burning homes and driving families into the wilderness in the dead of winter. Her own parents had died that winter, caught in a snowstorm while fleeing north. Uncle Greff had taken her in, raised her alongside his own daughter, taught her that survival meant invisibility and that humans were only safe when they did not notice you existed. I understand, Vasha said, but Rhett is not that kind of man. You do not know what kind of man he is. That is the point. Greff crossed his arms. 1 more week. If you cannot determine whether he is safe by then, we take other measures. What measures? The kind that keep this family protected. His tone left no room for argument. 1 week, Vasha, he left, closing the door firmly behind him. Vasha stood in the dark cabin, listening to Hela's breathing from the loft, and wondered what other measures meant. Nothing good. Uncle Greff was not cruel, but he was ruthless when it came to protecting the clan. If he decided Rhett was a threat, he would act, and Vasha did not want to think about what that action might look like. She climbed to her own cot and lay awake, watching the moon track across the window. The smart thing would be to stop visiting Rhett's cabin. The smart thing would be to lie to her uncle, say the human was dangerous, and let the family pack up and move before trouble found them. They had done it before. They could do it again. But the memory of Rhett's smile, the way he said her name like it mattered, the open door waiting for her, that made it hard to think about leaving. That made it impossible to think clearly at all. She did not go to his cabin the next night. She stayed in the orchard, working late to sort the last of the season's harvest, and tried not to think about whether Rhett was waiting, whether he had noticed her absence. Hella found her after dark, leaning against the sorting shed with her arms full of empty baskets. "You look miserable," Hella said. She was shorter than Vasha, rounder, with the same green skin and small tusks that marked them as kin. "What did father say to you?" "The usual, be careful, do not trust humans. Remember what happened to your parents." Vasha took some of the baskets from her cousin. "He gave me one more week. And then, I do not know, nothing good." Hella was quiet for a moment, her breath misting in the cold. "Do you like him, this human?" "It does not matter if I like him. That is not an answer." Vasha started toward the storage barn, her boots crunching on frost. "He is kind. He makes me laugh. When I am in his cabin, I feel like I can breathe, like I do not have to be scared all the time. Yes, I like him, which is exactly the problem." "Why is that a problem?" "Because Uncle Greff is right. I do not actually know him. I do not know why he came here, why he stays so isolated, what he is hiding." Vasha stacked the baskets inside the barn door. "And because even if he is everything he seems, even if he is the best man in the valley, it does not change the fact that I am lying to him. When he finds out, he will hate me. So tell him the truth. And risk the entire family if I am wrong about him." Hella did not have an answer for that. They finished the work in silence, then walked back to the cabin together. The lights were out in Rhett's cottage across the valley. Vasha wondered if he had waited, if he had noticed she did not come, if he was disappointed or relieved. She went back the next night because she could not stay away. The door was open again. Rhett was at the table, mending a harness by lamplight, and he looked up when she stepped inside. "I thought you might have decided I was too strange after all," he said, but his smile was warm. "I almost did." Vasha closed the door. "Then I realized I am probably stranger than you. Impossible. I once arrested a man for stealing his own pig." "Did you really?" "In my defense, I did not know it was his pig. He had reported it stolen 3 days earlier, and then I found him with it behind the tavern." Rhett set down the harness. "Turned out he forgot he sold it to the tavern keeper and then got drunk and decided to steal it back. It was a very complicated afternoon." Vasha laughed despite herself, sinking into the chair across from him. "You were a constable." Something shifted in Rhett's expression, a guardedness that had not been there before. "A long time ago. Different life. Is that why you came here?" "To get away from that life, something like that." He picked up the harness again, focusing on the leather. "What about you? Have you always worked the orchards?" It was a deflection, and not a subtle one, but Vasha let him have it. If Rhett had secrets, she was hardly in a position to judge. "Since I was 8. My parents died and my uncle took me in. The orchard is all I know." "I am sorry about your parents. It was a long time ago." She echoed his words back to him, wry and sad at once. "Different life." They looked at each other across the table, two people carrying histories they could not quite speak aloud. The lamp flickered. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. "Can I ask you something?" Rhett's voice was careful. "You do not have to answer, all right." "You are not really losing your key, are you?" Vasha's heart kicked hard against her ribs. "What makes you say that?" "Because no one has luck that bad. Because you never actually try to go home first, you just come straight here, because—" He set down the harness again, meeting her eyes. Because I think if you wanted to go home, you would. So either your family does not want you there, which I doubt given how much you clearly care about them, or you are coming here for a different reason, and I would like to know what it is. She should lie. She should make up something convincing, protect the family, walk away. Instead, Vasha heard herself say, "What if the reason is bad? How bad? Bad enough that you might not want the door open anymore." Rhett leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Did you come here to hurt me?" "No." "To rob me?" "No." "Then I am having trouble imagining what could be bad enough to make me want you to leave." He paused. "Unless you really do hate my tea and have been pretending this whole time, in which case I am not sure we can recover from that. Your tea is fine. Just fine." He pressed a hand to his chest in mock offense. "I am wounded. It is good, the tea is good." Vasha could not help smiling. "You are ridiculous. There it is. I knew you thought so." Rhett's expression softened. "Vasha, whatever you came here for originally, what matters to me is that you keep coming back. If you are ready to tell me why, I am ready to listen. If you are not, that is fine too. The door stays open either way." It was too much grace, too much trust, and she did not deserve any of it. Vasha looked down at her hands, green and calloused and strong. "My uncle sent me, to spy on me, to make sure you were not a threat." The words came out flat, matter of fact. "You are the first human to buy land this close to the orchard in 5 years. He was worried you might cause problems. So I was supposed to figure out what kind of man you are. And what did you decide? That you are kind, that you are lonely, that you make terrible jokes and good tea, and you never once treated me like I was something to be scared of." Vasha forced herself to meet his eyes. "And that I have been lying to you every single night, and I am sorry." The silence stretched. Rhett's expression was unreadable. Vasha waited for anger, for accusation, for the door to finally close. Instead, he said, "Your uncle is right to be careful. Humans have not given your people much reason to trust us. You are not angry. I am a man living alone on the frontier, asking no questions and making no ties. If I were your uncle, I would be suspicious too." Rhett picked up his cup, took a drink of cold tea, grimaced. "Though I admit, sending a beautiful woman to spy on me seems like cheating." Heat rushed to Vasha's face. "I am not, you are." He said it simply, like it was obvious. "But that is beside the point. The point is, I understand why you came. And I am glad you did, even if the reasons were not what I thought. At least now I know you are here because you choose to be, not because of some lost key. You really are strange. You already said that." Rhett stood, moving to the fireplace to reheat the kettle. "For what it is worth, I am not a threat to your family. I have no intention of causing problems for the orchard or telling anyone in the village that there are orcs working this valley. Your secret is safe. Just like that, just like that. But you do not know us. You do not know what we might, Vasha." He turned to face her. "You have been in my home 5 nights now. You could have poisoned my food, stolen my coin, cut my throat while I slept. You have done none of those things. Instead, you drank tea and told me stories and made me laugh for the first time in months. I think I know enough." It was trust she had not earned, faith she did not deserve. Vasha stood, suddenly overwhelmed by the need to leave before she said something foolish. "I should tell my uncle." "That you know, that you are safe. Will that make things easier for you? I do not know, maybe." She moved toward the door, then stopped. "Rhett? Yes. Why are you really here? In this valley, I mean. You said you were a constable once. What happened?" His jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he would not answer, would turn the deflection back on her. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I was a constable in a town called Rivermark, about 100 miles south of here. 3 years ago, the mayor decided the town had too many orcs and not enough jobs for humans. He ordered us to round them up, run them out, burn their homes if they did not leave fast enough. Rhett stared into the fire. I refused, told him it was illegal, immoral, and I would not do it. He fired me on the spot and gave the job to men who did not mind. I left before I had to watch what happened next. Vasha's stomach dropped. You lost your job for that. Not just my job. The mayor blacklisted me, made sure I could not work as a constable anywhere in the region. Put out word that I was a sympathizer, which is a dangerous thing to be called in some parts. He turned to look at her. I came here to disappear, to find someplace quiet where no one knew my name or my history. Clearly, I did not do a very good job of it since your uncle noticed me immediately. He notices everything. Vasha's voice was rough. Does anyone know you are here? From Rivermark, I mean. I do not think so. I have been careful. Why? Because if the mayor is still looking for you, if he sent men to find you. She trailed off, the implications settling like stones in her chest. You could still be in danger. Maybe, but that is my problem, not yours. Rhett's smile was tired. Go tell your uncle. Let him know I am not a threat. Then come back tomorrow if you want. The door will be open. Vasha left, stepping out into the cold, but this time she looked back. Rhett stood in the doorway, backlit by lamplight, watching her go. She raised a hand. He raised his in return. Then she turned and ran toward the orchard, her breath coming fast, her mind racing. Uncle Greff was in the main house, going over the accounts by candlelight. He looked up when Vasha burst in, his expression already shuddering. He knows, Vasha said before he could speak. He figured it out that I was watching him, and he does not care. He said he is not a threat, that he has no intention of causing problems for us. And you believe him? Yes. Why? Because he lost everything standing up for orcs once already. Because he is hiding here just like we are. Because she stopped trying to find the right words. Because I know him, Uncle. I know he is telling the truth. Greff set down his pen. You have been going there too much. You are letting him cloud your judgment. My judgment is fine. Is it? Because it sounds to me like you are falling for a human who could destroy this family with a few words in the right ears. His voice was hard. I do not care how kind he seems, Vasha. I do not care what he says he lost. People lie. People change their minds. And we cannot afford to bet our survival on your feelings. Then what do you want me to do? The words came out sharper than she intended. You sent me to watch him. I watched him. He is not a threat. What more do you need? Proof. What kind of proof? Greff stood, moving to the window. Outside, the orchard stretched dark and silent under the stars. I want to know where he came from. I want to know if anyone is looking for him. I want to know that if things go wrong, we have leverage to keep him quiet. He glanced back at her. You say he was a constable. Find out where, find out why he left. Get me something solid. He already told me why he left. Then it should be easy to confirm. Greff's tone left no room for argument. Bring me proof, Vasha. Until then, we assume he is dangerous. She wanted to argue, to push back, but the look in her uncle's eyes stopped her. This was not cruelty. This was fear, the kind that had kept them alive for 2 generations. And maybe he was right. Maybe she was letting her feelings blind her to risks she should be taking seriously. 1 week, Vasha said. Give me 1 week to find out what you need. If I cannot, we do this your way. 3 days, 5. Greff considered, then nodded. 5 days. After that, we make this problem go away. Vasha did not ask what that meant. She left the main house and walked back to her cabin, Hella already asleep in the loft. She lay awake for the 2nd night running, thinking about Rhett's smile and his open door and the way he had said, "Your secret is safe," like it was the easiest promise in the world. She went back to his cabin the next night, and the night after that, and each time the door stood open and Rhett welcomed her like she belonged there. They fell into a rhythm, a pattern of small domesticities that felt dangerously like a life. He cooked while she mended. She told stories while he carved new handles for tools. They argued about the best way to prune apple trees and whether the coming winter would be harsh or mild, and it felt so normal, so comfortable, that Vasha sometimes forgot she was supposed to be gathering information. But she was running out of time. On the third night, while Rhett was outside bringing in firewood, Vasha moved quickly through the cabin, looking for anything that might confirm his story. She found letters in a drawer, official correspondence addressed to Constable Rhett Marlowe in Rivermark. A commendation for service. A termination notice dated 3 years ago, the language coldly formal. And at the bottom of the stack, a wanted notice with Rhett's name and a reward of 50 gold crowns for information leading to his arrest. Her hands shook as she read it. The charges were vague, sedition and conspiracy, but the signature at the bottom was clear. Mayor Edmund Thorne of Rivermark. The notice was 2 years old. Find anything interesting, Vasha spun. Rhett stood in the doorway, his arms full of wood, his expression carefully neutral. I am sorry. She set down the papers. I should not have. Your uncle wanted proof. He crossed to the fireplace, set down the wood. I figured you would look eventually. You are wanted, apparently. 50 gold crowns, Rhett. That is enough to bring bounty hunters, I know. He began feeding logs into the fire, not looking at her. That is why I came here. This valley is remote, the village is small, and no one asks questions. I thought I could disappear. But if someone finds you, then I will deal with it. He straightened, dusting off his hands. I am not going to run again, Vasha. I am tired of running. The charges, sedition and conspiracy. What does that even mean? It means Mayor Thorne is creative. After I refused his order after I left, there was a fire. One of the buildings they were planning to seize from orc families burned down before they could take it. I was 100 miles away by then, but Thorne blamed me anyway. Said I conspired with the orcs to destroy human property. Rhett's laugh was bitter. The truth is, I think one of his own men got careless with a torch, but he needed someone to blame and I was convenient. Can you prove you were not there? Not easily. I was traveling alone, avoiding towns, not many witnesses. He moved to the table, sank into a chair. Even if I could prove it, it does not matter. Thorne has friends, money, influence. I am just a disgraced constable who made the mistake of choosing principle over politics. Vasha sat across from him, her mind racing. The wanted notice changed everything. It was not just about Rhett being a recluse or a former constable. It was about him being hunted at risk, valuable to the kind of men who would not hesitate to hurt anyone who got in their way. My uncle needs to know about this, she said slowly. But if I tell him, if he thinks you are bringing danger to the valley, he will want me gone. Yes. Then do not tell him. Rhett met her eyes. Or tell him and let him decide. I will leave if that is what it takes to keep your family safe. You just said you were not going to run again. I am not going to run from fear, but I will leave to protect people I care about. That is different. His voice softened. I will leave to protect you if that is what you need. The air between them went tight and charged. Vasha realized she was leaning forward, her hands flat on the table close enough to touch his. I do not want you to leave. Then what do you want? I want you to be safe. I want my family to be safe. I want, she stopped, swallowed hard. I want to stop lying. I want to stop being scared all the time. I want to come here because I want to, not because I have to spy on you or gather proof or play games. So do that. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Rhett reached across the table, his hand covering hers. His palm was warm, rough with calluses. Stop lying. Tell me the truth. Tell me what you want, Vasha. You. The word fell out before she could stop it. I want you. I want this, whatever this is. I want to stop pretending I am only here because my uncle sent me, and admit that I would be here anyway, even if he had never asked, because being with you is the best part of my day and has been since the first night. Rhett's fingers tightened on hers. That is all I needed to hear. He stood, pulling her up with him, and then his hands were framing her face and he was kissing her. It was not tentative or questioning. It was sure and warm and right, and Vasha kissed him back with everything she had been holding in for weeks. His lips were soft, his breath coming fast, and when they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that since the second night, he murmured. Why did you wait? I was trying to be respectful, trying not to assume. He kissed her again, quick and sweet. Also, I was terrified you might punch me. You have very strong hands. Vasha laughed, breathless and giddy. I would not have punched you. Good to know. They stood there, wrapped in each other while the fire burned low and the night deepened outside. Vasha felt like she was glowing from the inside out, warm and reckless and utterly certain for the first time in weeks. This was right. Them, whatever came next, it was worth the risk. Then reality crashed back in. I have to tell my uncle. I know. He is not going to like this. Probably not. Rhett brushed a strand of hair from her face. But you were right, we need to stop lying, that includes to your family. What if he makes me stop seeing you? Then we will figure something out, but at least it will be honest. He kissed her forehead. Go, tell him. I will be here when you get back. Vasha left the cabin, her lips still tingling, her heart hammering. The walk to the orchard felt too short and too long at once. Uncle Greff was in the sorting shed, checking the cold storage, and he turned when she entered. Well. He was a constable in Rivermark. He refused an order to run orcs out of the town. The mayor blacklisted him and put out a warrant for his arrest on false charges. He came here to disappear. Vasha took a breath. And there is a bounty on him, 50 gold crowns. If the wrong people find out he is here, they will come for him. Greff's expression darkened. That is exactly the kind of problem I was worried about. He is not a threat to us. He does not have to be. If bounty hunters come looking, if the law comes asking questions, we get caught in the middle. Greff crossed his arms. This is what happens when you let humans too close. They bring their troubles with them. He stood up for us. The words burst out, hot and furious. He lost his job, his livelihood, everything, because he would not hurt orcs. And you want to turn your back on him. I want to protect this family. That is my job, Vasha. Not rescuing every human with a guilty conscience. What if it was me? What if I was the one being hunted and a human family had the choice to help me or turn me away? What would you want them to do? Greff said nothing. His jaw worked, his hands flexing at his sides. He is a good man, Vasha pressed. And she stopped, then made herself say it. I care about him. More than I should, probably, but I do. And if you make me choose between him and this family, I do not know what I will do. You would leave, for a human. I do not want to, but I cannot walk away from him either. Her voice cracked. Please, uncle, give him a chance. Let him prove he is not a danger. If things go wrong, if trouble comes, I will handle it, but do not make me lose him before we even try. Greff stared at her for a long moment. Then he sighed, the anger draining out of him. You really care about this man. Yes, and you trust him. With my life. That is what worries me. He rubbed his face, suddenly looking older. All right, he can stay. For now. But if there is even a whisper of trouble, if anyone starts asking questions, he leaves. And you do not follow, are we clear? Clear. Vasha's throat was tight with relief. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. This could still go badly. Greff moved toward the door, then paused. Be careful, Vasha. I know you think he is worth the risk, but risks have a way of costing more than we expect. He left. Vasha stood alone in the sorting shed, her hands shaking, her heart too full for words. She had bought them time. Now she just had to hope it was enough. The next week passed in a blur of stolen hours and careful optimism. Vasha stopped pretending she was coming to Rhett's cabin for any reason other than wanting to be there. They cooked together, worked together, talked about futures that felt fragile but possible. Rhett kissed her in the firelight and told her stories about his years as a constable, the cases he had solved, the people he had helped. Vasha told him about growing up in the orchard, about her parents, about the fear that had shaped her whole life. "I want you to meet my uncle," she said one night, curled against Rhett's side on the narrow bench by the fire. "Properly. Not as someone to investigate, but as someone who matters to me. You think he will go for that? I think he needs to see what I see, that you are not a problem. That you are part of the solution." She looked up at him. "Will you come? If it is important to you, yes." They went the next evening, walking together through the orchard as the sun set. The trees were bare now, skeletal against the purple sky, but even stripped of leaves they held a stark beauty. Rhett reached for Vasha's hand, and she let him take it, their fingers interlacing naturally. Uncle Greff was waiting on the porch of the main house, Hella beside him. He watched them approach with an expression Vasha could not read. "Uncle Greff, this is Rhett Marlowe." Vasha's voice was steady. "Rhett, my uncle, and my cousin Hella." "Sir," Rhett inclined his head, "thank you for letting me come. I am not sure I had much choice." Greff's tone was dry. "My niece has a talent for getting her way. I noticed." Hella grinned. "I like him already." They went inside. The main house was larger than the cabin Vasha shared with Hella, built to hold the whole family when they gathered for meals or meetings. Tonight it was just the four of them, seated around the long table with mugs of cider and a loaf of bread still warm from the oven. The conversation started stilted, careful, but gradually loosened. Rhett asked about the orchard, and Greff found himself explaining the graft techniques that had made their fruit so prized in the village markets. Hella asked about Rivermark, and Rhett told stories that made her laugh. Vasha watched it all, feeling something in her chest unclench. This could work. This was working. Then there was a knock at the door. Everyone froze. It was full dark now, late for visitors, and the clan kept to themselves after sunset. Greff stood slowly, moving toward the door. He opened it a crack, his body blocking the view. "Can I help you?" His voice was cold, formal. "I am looking for a man." The voice outside was unfamiliar, male with a rough edge. "Goes by Rhett Marlowe. Heard he might be in this valley." Vasha's blood turned to ice. Beside her, Rhett had gone very still, his hand sliding toward the knife at his belt. "Never heard of him," Greff said. "That is funny, because the fellow in the village said a man matching his description bought land up this way about 3 months back. Keeps to himself, does not make trouble. Sound familiar? There are a lot of homesteads in this valley. Not that many, and I am willing to pay for information. 20 gold crowns to anyone who can point me in the right direction." The voice turned sly. "That is a lot of money, could do a lot with it. I cannot help you." Greff started to close the door. A boot jammed into the gap, stopping it. "Here is the thing. I have been tracking this man for 6 months. I know he is here. And I know he has been seen with a green-skinned woman, which is interesting, because I did not know there were orcs working this valley. That is the kind of information some folks in the village might pay good money for too." The threat hung in the air, ugly and clear. Vasha felt Rhett tense beside her, preparing to move, and she grabbed his wrist. "Not yet." "Get off my property," Greff said, his voice dropping to a growl. "Now, or what? You will call the law," the man laughed. "We both know you cannot do that. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to tell me where Marlowe is, I am going to collect him, and we all go our separate ways. Nobody needs to know about the orcs." I said get off my property. There was a scuffle, a grunt. Then Gref was stumbling back, the door slamming open, and a man pushed inside. He was big, scarred, with the hard look of someone who made a living from violence. His eyes swept the room, landing on Rhett. "There you are," he grinned. "You have been a pain to find, Marlowe." Rhett stood, placing himself between the man and Vasha. "Who sent you, Mayor Thorne? He has not forgotten you." The bounty hunter's hand moved to the sword at his hip. "You are coming back to Rivermark. Whether you walk or I drag you is up to you. I am not going anywhere." "That is the wrong answer." The sword came out fast. Rhett dodged, grabbed a chair, swung it up to block the strike. Wood splintered. Hella screamed. Gref lunged forward, tackling the bounty hunter from the side, and they went down in a tangle of limbs. The sword clattered away. Vasha dove for it, her hands closing on the hilt just as the hunter threw Gref off and scrambled to his feet. "Give me the sword, girl." "No." Vasha's voice was shaking but firm. She held the weapon in both hands, the point aimed at the hunter's chest. "You are leaving. Now." "You do not know how to use that. Try me." The hunter's eyes flicked between her and Rhett, calculating. Then he laughed, a sound without humor. "You are all dead anyway. You know that, right? I have 2 partners camped down the valley. When I do not come back, they will come looking. And they will not be as polite as I was. Then we will deal with them too." Rhett's voice was cold. "But you are leaving now while you still can." For a moment, Vasha thought the hunter would rush them. His hand twitched toward a knife at his belt. Then Gref stood, blood trickling from a cut above his eye, and the combined weight of all of them staring him down seemed to tip the balance. The hunter backed toward the door. "You are making a mistake. Thorne wants him bad enough to send a dozen more like me. You cannot protect him forever. Watch us." Vasha did not lower the sword until he was outside, until his footsteps were fading into the dark. Then she let it drop, her hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. "Uncle, I am fine." Gref wiped blood from his face. "But he is right. If there are more of them, if they know Rhett is here, this is not over. We need to leave." Rhett's voice was tight. "All of us. If those hunters come back, we are not leaving." Gref's tone was flat. "This is our home. We have spent 2 generations building this orchard. I am not abandoning it because of some hired thugs. They will burn you out if they think it will get to me. Then we make sure they do not get the chance." Gref locked eyes with Rhett. "You said you were a constable. You said you know the law. Is there any way to clear your name?" "To get the warrant lifted, maybe. If I could get testimony to the regional magistrate, if I could prove I was not in Rivermark when the fire happened, he might overturn Thorne's charges. But it would take time and evidence, and a lot of luck," Gref finished. "All right. Then we buy you time. The orchard is big. We know these woods better than any outsider. If hunters come looking, we lead them in circles until you can do what you need to do. You would do that. Risk your family for me. I am doing it for Vasha. And for every orc who has ever needed a human to stand up and do the right thing." Gref's expression softened slightly. "You did that once. Now let us return the favor." Rhett looked at Vasha. She nodded, her throat too tight for words. This was it. This was the moment where running stopped and fighting back began. "All right," Rhett said. "Tell me what you need me to do." They spent the rest of the night planning. Hela went to rouse the rest of the clan. A dozen orcs scattered across the valley, all of whom had as much to lose as Gref if the bounty hunters started making noise. By dawn, they had sentries posted, supplies cached in the woods, and a plan to keep Rhett hidden while he worked on clearing his name. It was rough, desperate, built on hope and determination rather than certainty, but it was a plan. Vasha stayed close to Rhett as the sun rose, her hand in his. "This is my fault. If I had not pushed you to stay, stop." He turned to face her. "This was always going to happen. The only difference is now I am not facing it alone. You are sure about this, about trusting us? I have never been more sure of anything. He kissed her, soft and lingering. We are going to fix this, together. The next days were a blur of watching and waiting. The hunters did come back. Two hard-faced men asking questions in the village and poking around the valley. The clan led them on a winding chase through the orchard and into the deep woods, always one step ahead, always out of reach. Rhett stayed hidden in a cave system Hella knew from childhood, working on letters to the magistrate, gathering every scrap of evidence he could remember from his time in Rivermark. Vasha brought him food and supplies, keeping him company in the cold dark. They talked about what came next, about the life they might build if this worked, about the futures that felt less fragile with every passing day. I want to stay here, Rhett said one night, his voice echoing softly off stone. In this valley. With you. If your uncle will have me, if the clan will trust me, I want to make this my home. You would do that. Give up being a constable, live on the frontier, spend your life among orcs. I would do that gladly. The only thing I have wanted for 3 years is to stop running and start living. I found that here, I found you. He pulled her close, his arms warm and solid around her. So yes, if we get through this, I want to stay. Then we will make sure we get through this. Vasha rested her head on his shoulder. Because I want you to stay too. 3 weeks later, a response came from the magistrate. It was brief, formal, and it changed everything. The magistrate was willing to hear Rhett's case, but he would need to present himself in person, with witnesses and evidence. It was a risk, leaving the safety of the valley, but it was also the only path forward. Greff volunteered to go with him. You will need someone to vouch for you, someone who can speak to your character these past months. I will do it. You do not have to. Yes, I do. You stood up for my people once. Let me stand up for you now. Greff clapped Rhett on the shoulder. Besides, Vasha would kill me if I let you go alone. They left at dawn, riding south toward the regional seat. Vasha stood at the edge of the orchard and watched them go, her heart in her throat. Hella came up beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. He will come back, Hella said softly. They both will. You do not know that. I know he loves you. I know he is stubborn. That is a powerful combination. Hella squeezed her gently. Have faith, cousin. The waiting was agony. Vasha threw herself into work, pruning and mending and preparing the orchard for spring. But every night she went to Rhett's cabin and stood in the doorway, staring at the open door and the empty room beyond. She did not go inside. It felt wrong without him there, like trespassing on something sacred. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Vasha was beginning to give in to despair when a rider came up the valley road, moving fast. She ran to meet them, her heart hammering, and nearly collapsed when she saw Rhett's face. You did it. The words came out choked. You are free. The magistrate overturned the charges. Thorn is being investigated for abuse of power. Rhett slid from the saddle, catching her as she threw herself at him. It is over, Vasha. I am not running anymore. Where is Uncle Greff? Right behind me. He stopped to buy supplies in the village. Rhett pulled back enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. I have something to ask you, but I want to do it properly. What do you mean? He reached into his coat, pulled out a small iron key. It was old, ornate, the kind that might open a treasure chest or a strong box. I bought a piece of land, the parcel next to the orchard. There is a house on it, small but sturdy, needs work, but it has good bones. Vasha stared at the key. You bought land here. I told you I wanted to stay. I meant it. Rhett pressed the key into her hand, folding her fingers around it. This is yours if you want it, if you want me. No more lost keys, no more lies, just us building a life together. Rhett, I love you. He said it simply, like it was the easiest truth in the world. I have loved you since the night you showed up at my door with that ridiculous excuse about losing your key. I love your laugh and your strength and the way you hum when you think no one is listening. I love how you care about your family and how you fight for what matters. I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me. Vasha could not speak. She could barely breathe. The key was warm in her hand, solid and real, a promise made physical. Say yes, Rhett whispered. Please say yes. Yes. The word came out fierce and sure. Yes, I want this. I want you, I want the house and the life and all of it. He kissed her, deep and thorough, and she kissed him back with everything she had. When they broke apart, she was laughing, giddy and breathless. So no more pretending to lose my key. Well, you can if you want. But now you have got a real one, so it seems unnecessary. Rhett grinned. Though I will always leave the door open for you, just in case. They walked back to the cabin together, hand in hand, and this time when Vasha crossed the threshold, it felt like coming home. The fire was cold, but they built it up together, working in comfortable silence. Greff arrived an hour later, laden with supplies and wearing an expression that was almost a smile. The magistrate sends his regards, he told Rhett, and his apologies for not acting sooner. Apparently, Thorn has been dirty for years, and your case was the excuse he needed to open an investigation. So it really is over, it really is. Greff set down the supplies, then turned to Vasha. He asked me to stand witness, to speak about his character. I told the magistrate that Rhett Marlowe was the kind of man who put principle over safety, who treated my family with respect, and who made my niece happier than I have seen her in years. His voice softened. I also told him that if he did not clear those charges, I would make his life very difficult. But that is between us. Rhett laughed. Thank you for everything. Do not thank me, just take care of her. Greff looked at Vasha. You have my blessing, both of you. Build your house, build your life. Be happy. Vasha hugged him, hard and fierce, and felt the last of her fear drain away. This was real. This was happening. They were going to be all right. The house was small, as Rhett had said, but it had a good foundation and a solid roof. Over the winter, they worked together to make it a home. Rhett doing the heavy repairs while Vasha painted and furnished and planted a garden that would bloom in spring. The clan helped, bringing furniture and supplies, folding Rhett into their community with the same quiet efficiency they brought to everything. By the time spring arrived and the orchard burst into blossom, the house was finished. It sat at the edge of the valley, close enough to the clan that Vasha could walk to the main house in minutes, far enough that they had privacy. The door was painted blue, sturdy and strong, and it opened easily on oiled hinges. On the first day of spring, Rhett stood on the porch and watched Vasha walk up the path, her arms full of flowers from the orchard. She was wearing a green dress that matched her skin, and her hair was braided with ribbons that caught the light. Are you just going to stand there, or are you going to help me? She called, laughing. I am admiring the view. You are being ridiculous. That too. He came down to meet her, taking half the flowers and kissing her soundly. Welcome home. I have been home for months. I know. But it feels right to say it again. Rhett opened the door, gesturing her inside. Shall we? The interior was warm and bright, the furniture they had chosen together arranged just so. There was a table by the window, a fireplace with a mantel that held Vasha's carvings, a bed in the corner that they had built from scratch. It was theirs, every inch of it, earned through trust and work and love. Vasha set the flowers in a vase, arranging them carefully. I still have the key you gave me. I keep it in my pocket. Do you ever use it? No, you always leave the door open. She turned to face him. But I like knowing it is there, just in case, just in case. Rhett crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. I love you too. They stood there, wrapped in each other, while the spring sun poured through the windows and the orchard bloomed outside. There were still challenges ahead, prejudices to navigate, a frontier life that would never be easy. But they would face it together with a clan at their backs and a home to return to, and that was more than enough. The door stayed open, a standing invitation, and Vasha never needed to knock again. She walked through it freely, carrying her key in her pocket and her heart on her sleeve, and every single day felt like coming home. Years passed in the valley, measured in harvests and seasons and the slow, steady rhythm of a life built on shared work. Rhett and Vasha became fixtures in the clan, as much a part of the orchard as the trees themselves. He learned to graft and prune, to read the weather and judge when fruit was ready to pick. She taught him the songs her mother had sung, the stories that had been passed down through generations, the small rituals that made their community strong. The village below grew, used to seeing them together, the human man and the orc woman who ran goods to market and never caused trouble. There were still whispers, still narrow looks from those who could not reconcile their prejudices with the evidence of their eyes, but there was also acceptance, grudging at first and then genuine. Rhett's reputation as a fair and honest man helped. So did Vasha's steady warmth, the way she treated everyone with the same dignity regardless of how they looked at her. In the second year, they were married in a ceremony that blended human and orc traditions, held in the orchard at sunset with the clan and a handful of villagers in attendance. Gref gave Vasha away, his voice gruff with emotion. Hela stood as witness, grinning through happy tears, and when Rhett slipped a ring on Vasha's finger and promised to love her for the rest of his days, there was not a dry eye in the crowd. "You are sure about this?" Vasha whispered as they stood together under the flowering trees. "It is not too late to run. I have never been more sure of anything." Rhett kissed her, long and sweet, while the clan cheered. No more running, just living. They spent their wedding night in the little blue house, tangled together in the bed they had built, and talked until dawn about the future. About the children they might have, the life they would build, the orchard that would be their legacy. It felt vast and possible, full of hope. In the third year, Vasha discovered she was pregnant. The news terrified and delighted her in equal measure. She told Rhett one evening by the fire, her voice shaking, and he stared at her for a long moment before whooping and spinning her around the room. "We are having a baby." He kept saying it like he could not quite believe it. "We are going to be parents. Are you ready for that?" "Absolutely not, but I cannot wait." He set her down gently, his hands resting on her still flat belly. "This is going to be amazing." The pregnancy was not easy. Vasha was sick for months, exhausted and aching, and there were moments when she wondered if she was strong enough to do this. But Rhett was there, steady and patient, bringing her tea and rubbing her back and reading to her from books he bought in the village. Hela moved in for the last month, helping with the household work and preparing for the birth, and Uncle Gref stopped by daily, his gruff demeanor softening every time he looked at Vasha. "You are going to be a wonderful mother," he told her one afternoon, his hand resting briefly on her shoulder. "Just like your mother was." The words broke something open in Vasha's chest, a grief she had carried for so long it had become part of her. "I wish she could be here. She is, in you, in the baby you are going to bring into this world." Gref squeezed her shoulder. She would be so proud. When the labor started, it was long and brutal. Vasha labored through the night and into the next day, Rhett holding her hand and whispering encouragement, Hela and the clan's midwife working to bring the baby safely into the world. There were moments when Vasha thought she could not do it, when the pain was too much and she wanted to give up, but Rhett's voice kept her grounded. "You can do this. You are the strongest person I know. Just a little longer." And then, finally, a cry split the air, thin and furious, and the midwife was pressing a squirming bundle into Vasha's arms. "A boy," she said, smiling. A healthy boy. Vasha looked down at her son, at his green skin and tiny tusks and the shock of dark hair on his head, and felt her heart expand to hold a love she had not known was possible. He was perfect. He was theirs. "Hello, Darren," Rhett whispered, his voice thick with tears. "Welcome to the world." Darren Marlowe grew fast, a bright and curious child who toddled through the orchard and asked 1,000 questions a day. He had Rhett's easy smile and Vasha's fierce determination, and he was loved fiercely by the entire clan. Uncle Greff doted on him shamelessly, carving toys and telling stories. Hella taught him songs, and Rhett and Vasha watched him grow with a mixture of pride and wonder, marveling at the life they had created together. When Darren was 2, Vasha became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and when their daughter was born on a bright summer morning, it felt like a gift. They named her Vera, and she had her mother's eyes and her father's laugh, and from the moment she arrived, she ruled the household with an iron fist wrapped in dimpled smiles. The blue house was full of noise and life and love. There were scraped knees and bedtime stories, fights over toys and shared meals around the table. The orchard thrived, the clan grew, and the valley became a place where humans and orcs worked side by side, building something better than what had come before. On their 10th anniversary, Rhett and Vasha stood on the porch of the blue house and watched their children play in the garden. Darren was teaching Vera how to climb the apple tree, his voice patient and encouraging. The orchard stretched out behind them, heavy with fruit, and the sky was the deep blue of late summer. "You ever think about how this started?" Vasha asked, leaning into Rhett's side. "With a lie about a lost key, I think about it all the time." Rhett wrapped an arm around her waist. "Best lie you ever told." "You knew it was a lie," I suspected, "but I did not care." He kissed the top of her head. "You kept coming back, that was all that mattered. And you kept the door open." "I always will." They stood there, watching their children, and Vasha thought about all the doors that had closed in her life, all the places she had not been welcome. And then she thought about this door, the blue one that had stood open for her from the very first night, and the man who had seen her fear and her lies and her desperate need to belong, and had said, "Come in. You are welcome here." "I love you," she said, the words simple but weighted with years of meaning. "I love you too." Rhett turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face. "Thank you." "For what?" "For losing your key, for knocking on my door, for giving me a reason to stop running and start living." His smile was crooked and warm, and everything she had fallen in love with. "For building this life with me. It is a good life. The best." They kissed, slow and sweet, while their children played and the orchard hummed with bees and the valley spread out golden and peaceful below them. The door to the blue house stood open behind them, a promise kept, a welcome extended, a life built on trust and love and the simple act of leaving space for someone to come home. And Vasha never needed to knock again. She walked through freely, her key tucked safe in her pocket, her heart full and her future bright, and every single day was a gift she had earned by being brave enough to lie about losing something she had never lost at all. The orchard continued its cycles, spring blossoms giving way to summer fruit and autumn harvest, year after year. Darren grew tall and strong, taking on more responsibilities in the orchard as he reached his teenage years. Vera was fearless and clever, dividing her time between helping her mother with the harvest and convincing her father to teach her the old constable skills he rarely spoke about. The clan prospered, their fruit sought after in markets throughout the region, their reputation for quality unmatched. The blue house became a gathering place, a neutral ground where humans and orcs could meet on equal terms. Rhett's past as a constable gave him a certain authority in disputes, and people began coming to him for advice, for mediation, for help navigating the complicated social dynamics of a frontier where two peoples were learning to coexist. He never charged for his time, never turned anyone away, and slowly but surely, the valley became known as a place where fairness mattered more than species. On a crisp autumn morning 15 years after that first night with a lost key, Vasha stood in the orchard and looked out at everything they had built. The trees were heavy with apples ready for picking, the air sweet with their scent. Rhett was nearby, showing Darin the proper technique for testing ripeness, while Vera chased a butterfly between the rows. Uncle Gref was older now, his hair gone entirely gray, but he still supervised the harvest with the same keen eye. "We did well," Hela said, coming up beside Vasha. She was carrying a basket of early picks, her own children trailing behind her, better than anyone expected. "We did." Vasha watched her family, her clan, the life they had built against all odds, better than I ever dreamed. "Do you ever regret it, lying to him that first night, every day?" Vasha's smile was rueful. "And not at all. If I had been honest from the start, I do not know if we would have gotten here. Sometimes you need the lie to find the truth. That is either very wise or completely nonsensical, probably both." They worked through the morning, filling baskets and crates, laughing and talking and enjoying the last warmth of the season. When the sun was high, they broke for lunch, gathering under the trees to share bread and cheese and cold cider. Rhett sat beside Vasha, their shoulders touching, while the children ran wild and the adults swapped stories. "Papa," Vera said, flopping down beside them with all the grace of a 12-year-old, "tell the story again, about how you and Mama met. You have heard it 100 times. So." "I want to hear it again." Rhett glanced at Vasha, who shrugged, smiling. "Go ahead, you tell it better." "That is not true, but all right." Rhett settled back against the tree trunk, pulling Vera into his lap even though she was getting too big for it. "Once upon a time, there was a man who bought a little house in a valley. He did not know anyone, and he liked it that way. He thought he was going to live alone for the rest of his life. But then Mama came," Vera prompted. "But then your mother came. She knocked on his door one cold night and told him the most ridiculous lie about losing her key." "It was not ridiculous," Vasha protested, laughing. "It was plausible. It was transparent. But the man did not care, because your mother was beautiful and funny and he wanted her to come back. So he pretended to believe the lie. And Mama kept coming back. She did. Night after night with a new excuse every time. And every night the man fell a little more in love with her. Until one day he decided to stop waiting for her to knock. He left the door open. Because he wanted her to know she was welcome," Vera finished. "That she always had a place there." "Exactly." Rhett kissed the top of her head. "And your mother kept coming back, and eventually she stayed and they built a life together. The end." "That is the best story," Vera sighed happily. Darin rolled his eyes from where he was sprawled in the grass. "You are such a romantic, Vera. And you are such a grouch, am not, are too." "All right, you two," Vasha interrupted, still smiling. "Save the fighting for after lunch." They settled down, bickering good-naturedly, and Vasha leaned into Rhett's side. "You really do tell it better. I have practice. Vera asks at least once a week. She loves love stories. She gets that from you." "I do not love love stories. I love our story." Vasha turned her head to look at him. "There is a difference. Not much of one." They sat there, surrounded by family and plenty and the fruits of years of hard work, and Vasha thought about how many doors had been closed to her over the years. How many times she had been turned away, told she did not belong, made to feel like her existence was a problem to be solved. And then she thought about Rhett, standing in the doorway of his little cabin with the light behind him, saying, Come in before you freeze. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. One open door had changed everything. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the family packed up the remnants of lunch and headed back toward the houses. The children ran ahead, racing each other down the rows of trees. Uncle Gref walked with Hella, their voices low and comfortable. And Rhett and Vasha brought up the rear hand in hand, in no hurry to reach the end of the path. I am glad you lost your key, Rhett said quietly. I never had a key to lose. I know, but I am glad you pretended. He squeezed her hand. I am glad you knocked. I am glad I opened the door. Me too. They walked the rest of the way in comfortable silence, and when they reached the blue house, the door stood open just as it always had. Warm light spilled out onto the grass, welcoming and golden, and Vasha felt the now familiar sense of coming home settle over her like a blanket. Do you think we will ever close that door? She asked, pausing on the threshold. You want to? No, but I wonder sometimes what it would be like to have that kind of privacy. We can close it any time you want. Rhett pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her from behind. But I like it open. I like knowing that anyone who needs us can find us, that we are not hiding. Not hiding, Vasha repeated softly. I like that. They stood there, wrapped in each other, while the night deepened and the stars came out one by one. Inside the house, they could hear Darin and Vera arguing about something, their voices rising and falling in the familiar rhythm of sibling rivalry. Outside, the orchard rustled in the breeze, settling in for the night. Come on, Rhett murmured, pulling her inside. Let us see what chaos the children have created. The chaos turned out to be minor, a disagreement over who got the last piece of apple cake, and it was resolved quickly with the promise that Vasha would bake another one tomorrow. They settled into their evening routine, cleaning up the kitchen, getting the children ready for bed, banking the fire. It was ordinary and comfortable and exactly what Vasha had always wanted without knowing to name it. When the house was finally quiet, Darin and Vera asleep in their rooms, Rhett and Vasha sat together by the fire. She was mending one of Vera's dresses and he was reading, his glasses perched on his nose. The silence was easy, undemanding. I have been thinking, Rhett said, setting down his book. Always dangerous, he smiled. I have been thinking that we should travel, take the children, go south, let them see more of the world. They have never been farther than the village. That would be expensive and complicated, but worth it. They should know there is more out there than this valley. Good and bad, all of it. He paused. I want them to see that the world is bigger than prejudice, that there are places where humans and orcs live side by side, where mixed families are not unusual. Are there such places? A few. And even if there are not, they should see what is out there, so they can come back here and know they are choosing this life, not just accepting it because it is all they have ever known. Vasha set down her mending, considering, where would we go? There is a city on the coast. I have heard they have a university that welcomes all peoples, libraries, museums, places where a curious mind can learn. Rhett reached for her hand. Darin is old enough, Vera too, it would be good for them. And for us. And for us. His smile was warm. I want to show you the ocean, Vasha. I want to walk on the beach with you and eat food we have never tasted and sleep in strange beds and have adventures, while we are still young enough to enjoy them. We are not old. We are not young either. The children will be grown before we know it. I want to do this while we are still a family under one roof. He squeezed her hand. What do you think? What did she think? She thought it sounded terrifying and wonderful and utterly unlike anything she had ever imagined for herself. But then, so was everything about the life she had built with Rhett. Terrifying and wonderful and utterly hers. All right, she said. Let us do it. Let us see the ocean." They went in the spring when the orchard was blooming but the harvest was still months away. Uncle Gref grumbled about them leaving but helped them plan the route, marking towns where they could find safe lodging, warning them away from places where orcs were not welcome. Hela packed food for the journey, enough to last a week. The clan gathered to see them off, pressing gifts and advice on them until Rhett laughingly called for mercy. "We will be back in a month," he promised. "The orchard will not fall apart without us." "Do not be so sure," Gref muttered, but his eyes were soft as he hugged Vasha. "Be safe, all of you." "We will." They set out on a bright morning, the wagon loaded with supplies and the children bouncing with excitement. The road wound south through the valley and into lands Vasha had never seen, forests and rivers and rolling hills that seemed to go on forever. They stopped in small towns and slept under the stars, and slowly the knot of fear in Vasha's chest loosened as she realized that the world was full of people who did not care about her green skin or her tusks, who saw her family and smiled instead of scowled. There were difficult moments, too. A tavern keeper who refused to serve them, a group of men who shouted slurs as they passed, a town where the constable made it clear they were not welcome to stay the night. But those moments were outnumbered by kindness, by strangers who helped them find their way, by children who played with Darin and Vera without a second thought. And then, after 2 weeks of travel, they crested a hill and saw the ocean. It was vast and blue and utterly unlike anything Vasha had imagined, stretching out to the horizon in a glittering expanse. The smell of salt was sharp in the air, and the sound of waves was a constant low roar. Darin and Vera whooped and scrambled down the hill, racing toward the water, and Vasha followed more slowly, Rhett beside her. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "It is." He wrapped an arm around her waist. "I am glad we came." They spent 3 days in the coastal city, exploring the university and the markets, eating strange foods and meeting people from all corners of the world. Vasha saw orcs and humans and other peoples she had no names for, all living and working together, and it filled her with a hope she had not realized she was missing. The world was changing, slowly, painfully, but changing, and her family was part of that change. On their last night, they walked along the beach after dark, the children splashing in the shallows while Vasha and Rhett strolled hand in hand. The moon was full, turning the water silver, and the air was warm and soft. "Thank you," Vasha said, "for bringing us here. Thank you for coming." Rhett stopped, turning to face her. "I know it was not easy, leaving the valley trusting that the world out here would not hurt you, but you did it, and I am so proud of you. I did it because you were with me." She reached up to cup his face. "I can do anything with you beside me." "I feel the same way." He kissed her, slow and sweet, while the waves crashed and the children laughed and the world spun on around them. "I love you, Vasha Marlowe. I love you too." They stood there, wrapped in each other, and Vasha thought about the girl she had been 15 years ago, lying to a stranger about a lost key because she was too scared to tell the truth. That girl would not recognize the woman she had become, confident and loved and unafraid. But that girl had made this possible, one lie and one open door at a time. The journey home was slower, easier, full of stories to tell and memories to hold. When they finally rolled back into the valley, the orchard in full bloom around them, it felt like the best kind of homecoming. Uncle Gref was waiting on the porch of the main house, his relief visible even from a distance. "You are late," he called as they pulled up. "We took the scenic route," Rhett called back, grinning, "and you are all in one piece, more or less." Gref came down to help unload, and the clan gathered around, eager for stories. Darin and Vera talked over each other, describing the ocean and the city and the strange foods they had eaten. Hela laughed and clapped and declared that they were all very brave. And Vasha stood in the middle of it, her family around her, and felt the rightness of it settle deep in her bones. This was home. This was where she belonged. And no matter where they went or what they saw, this valley with its blue house and open door would always be the place she returned to. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Vasha stood on the porch and looked out at the orchard. The trees were ghostly in the moonlight, their blossoms glowing pale. Rhett came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured. "I was thinking about that first night when I knocked on your door with my terrible lie." She leaned back against him. "I was so scared, I thought if you found out you would hate me, you would send me away. But I did not. No, you left the door open." She turned in his arms to face him. "Do you know what that meant to me? What it still means? Tell me." "It means I am not alone. It means I have a place to go when the world is cold. It means someone sees me, really sees me, and wants me anyway." Her voice cracked. "It means I am home." Rhett's eyes were bright with tears. "You are home. You always will be. No matter what." They stood there, holding each other while the night deepened and the orchard whispered around them. The blue door stood open behind them, just as it always had, just as it always would. A promise kept. A welcome extended. A life built on love and trust, and the simple courage to walk through an open door. And Vasha knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that she would never need another key again. She had everything she needed right here in this valley with this man, in this life they had built together. One door, one choice, one love. It was more than enough. It was everything. The years continued their steady march, and the blue house saw its share of joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges. Darren eventually chose to study law, inspired by his father's stories of justice and fairness, and left for the coastal university they had visited years before. It was hard to watch him go, but Vasha and Rhett stood on the porch and waved until he was out of sight, trusting that they had raised him strong enough to face the world on his own terms. Vera stayed closer to home, developing a passion for agriculture and innovation that transformed the orchard. She experimented with new grafting techniques, studied soil composition, and by the time she was 20, she had increased the orchard's yield by nearly a third. Uncle Greff declared her a genius and began training her to take over the operation one day. Rhett's hair went fully gray, and Vasha found her first silver strands among the black. They laughed about getting old, about the aches that came with decades of hard work, about the way time seemed to move faster with every passing year. But they were healthy and happy, still working side by side, still falling into bed exhausted and content at the end of each day. When Uncle Greff died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, the entire valley mourned. He had been the heart of the clan, the one who had kept them safe through years of uncertainty and change. His funeral was held in the orchard, under trees he had planted decades before, and Rhett spoke about the man who had given him a chance when he had every reason not to. "He taught me that courage is not about fighting," Rhett said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "It is about choosing to trust when trust seems dangerous, about opening your home and your heart to people who are different from you, because that is the right thing to do." Rhett Narok was the bravest man I ever knew, and I am honored to have called him family. Vasha wept, held by Hela on one side and Rhett on the other, and felt the weight of leadership settle onto her shoulders. She was the eldest now, the one the clan would look to for guidance. It was a responsibility she had never asked for but would not shirk. Under her leadership, the orchard continued to thrive. The valley's reputation as a place of tolerance and fairness grew, and more people came, both human and orc, looking for a place to belong. Some stayed, building houses and contributing to the community. Others moved on, carrying stories of the valley where species did not matter as much as character. Darren returned after 5 years, now a qualified advocate for frontier law, and set up a practice in the village. He married a human woman named Sarah, and they gave Vasha and Rhett their first grandchild, a boy they named Garrett. Holding that baby, seeing her son's joy, feeling the continuation of their family across generations, it filled Vasha with a sense of completion she had not known she was waiting for. Vera married an orc man from a neighboring valley, a quiet fellow named Tom who shared her passion for agriculture. They built a house on the edge of the orchard and had 3 children in quick succession, filling the valley with noise and laughter and chaos. On their 30th anniversary, Rhett and Vasha stood in the doorway of the blue house and looked out at everything they had built. The house itself had been expanded over the years, additions tacked on as the family grew and their needs changed. But the original door, the blue one that had stood open that first night, remained unchanged. 30 years, Vasha marveled. How did that happen, one day at a time? Rhett pulled her close. With you beside me every step of the way. Do you regret it, any of it? Not for a single second. He turned her to face him. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Vasha. This life, this family, this valley, all of it. I would not change a moment. Not even the part where I lied to you about losing my key, especially not that part. He kissed her forehead. That lie brought you to my door. Everything else followed from there. They celebrated their anniversary with the whole family, a feast that spilled out of the house and into the orchard. 3 generations gathered to mark the day that Vasha and Rhett had pledged themselves to each other. There were toasts and stories and laughter that rang through the trees, and when the sun set and the lanterns were lit, they danced under the stars just as they had at their wedding 30 years before. Vasha danced with Rhett, then with Darren, then with each of her grandchildren in turn. She danced with Hela, who was now the clan's elder wisewoman, and with Vera, who had inherited her mother's love of celebration. And when she was breathless and laughing and utterly exhausted, she collapsed onto a bench beside Rhett and accepted a cup of cider from one of her grandchildren. I am too old for this much dancing, she declared. You are not old, you are seasoned. Rhett's eyes twinkled. That is a polite way of saying old. It is a polite way of saying you have earned every gray hair and laugh line and you wear them beautifully. Flatterer, truth-teller. He raised his cup. To 30 more years, you are ambitious. I am optimistic. There is a difference. He clinked his cup against hers. What do you say? Shall we see how far we can take this? Vasha looked around at her family, at the orchard that had been her salvation, at the valley that had become a beacon for those seeking a better way. She looked at the blue house with its open door, welcoming anyone who needed shelter or friendship or hope. And she looked at Rhett, the man who had changed everything by simply stepping aside and saying, "Come in." 30 more years, she agreed, and then we will see about another 30 after that. They lived out their days in the valley, working and loving and watching their family grow. Rhett eventually retired from the heavier work, content to supervise and offer advice while younger hands did the lifting. Vasha continued to oversee the orchard, sharp-eyed and capable, until her own grandchildren were old enough to take on the responsibility. They grew old together, slowly and gracefully, their love deepening with time rather than fading. They held hands on evening walks through the orchard. They sat together by the fire and told stories to their grandchildren about the early days, when everything was new and uncertain and full of possibility. They argued about small things and laughed about silly ones, and never once took each other for granted. On a warm summer evening, 43 years after that first night with the lost key, Vasha and Rhett sat on the porch of the blue house and watched the sun set over the valley. They were older now, moving slower, but their minds were sharp and their hearts were full. "Do you remember what I said that first night?" Rhett asked. "About the door being open." "I remember." Vasha's voice was soft with memory. "You said I did not have to keep losing keys to visit, that the door was always open. And I meant it, every word." He turned to look at her, his brown eyes warm. "It is still open, you know, for you, for our children, for anyone who needs it. That has never changed." "I know." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for that, for giving me a place to belong when I needed it most. Thank you for being brave enough to knock, even with a terrible excuse about a lost key." His arm came around her, holding her close. "Best decision I ever made, opening that door. Best decision I ever made, walking through it." They sat there as the light faded and the stars emerged, comfortable in the silence, secure in the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. The blue door stood open behind them, a constant through decades of change, a symbol of the life they had built on trust and love and the courage to be vulnerable. Inside, they could hear their grandchildren playing, their voices high and happy. Outside, the orchard rustled in the evening breeze, heavy with fruit and promise. And between those two worlds, on the porch of a little blue house that had become the heart of a community, two people who had found each other against all odds sat together and counted themselves blessed. The door stood open. It always had. It always would. And that, Vasha thought as she drifted into contented sleep against Rhett's shoulder, was the greatest gift of all. Not a key to lock others out, but an open door to let love in. One door, one choice. One magnificent, improbable, utterly perfect life built on the foundation of welcome. She had never needed a key at all. She just needed the courage to walk through a door that someone had left open, believing she was worth the risk. And in the end, that belief had made all the difference. The valley carried on its traditions, generation after generation, always with an open door as its heart. And though the specific people changed, the love remained constant, a legacy passed down from two souls who proved that sometimes the best things in life begin with a lie about losing something you never had, and a stranger kind enough to pretend to believe you.